I'm Karni Zor, and I want to talk to you about the solar eclipse that will take place at December 14th. Now, just to give a little introduction, 2020 was the most extraordinary year in all manners. We saw it in the stars in many, many ways. And of course, we saw it in our reality and in our life. 2020 started in between two eclipses, a solar eclipse just at the end of 2019 and a lunar eclipse that was taking place at January 10th, 2020. So this unique time in between two eclipses was the time 2020 was born at. And if you would look at the 2020's natal chart, as you look at the person's chart, you will understand it's a year of lots of karmic issues, things popping up, lots of changes, very, very challenging year. Usually, in the time between two eclipses, I recommend not to do anything. And this time, a whole year was born in between two eclipses, not only a year, but a whole decade. But now let's see what we're heading towards the end of this year. So 2020 started in between two eclipses. Eclipses usually come in couples. So what is a solar eclipse and what is a lunar eclipse? As we know, planet Earth revolves around the sun. Well, takes a whole year for it to revolve around the sun. And the moon revolves around planet Earth very, very, very quickly every month. Okay, so once a month it does a full cycle around planet Earth. Now, every month it will happen. Remember the sun here, I can't hold both. Okay, so the sun is here, for example, and a lunar month starts when the moon is very close to the sun. You don't see it in the sky because it's too close to it, and it moves quite fast. It takes 2 weeks till there is a full moon, and then the moon reduces again in another period of 2 weeks, and then it's again in alignment to the sun. Now, at this point where the sun and the moon, from the way it looks from Earth, if you'll see, this is how it looks from Earth. Yes, so they're eclipsing one another. So you would think that every month there would be a solar eclipse. But the fact is that because these are bodies that have a huge arena they revolve around in the sky, that usually they won't really be eclipsing one another, but rather usually it looks something like this. So the moon would end up a bit below the sun or above the sun, but twice a year this alignment would be really perfect. And then in the beginning of a lunar cycle we'll have a solar eclipse. The moon is eclipsing the sun. It's just before it, and it happens to have a perfect alignment between Earth, the moon, and the sun, so it really covers the sun, which is a very unique thing because the moon and the sun are very, very different in size. But then again, when they come together, they look, just because the moon is much closer to Earth, they look exactly the same size, and the moon covers the sun. This is a solar eclipse. When the month will continue, the same month when there is this same alignment, and the moon will come to be a full moon 2 weeks after that. Okay, now imagine that my head is the planet Earth, and now we'll have a lunar eclipse when the planet Earth, when our planet Earth really hides the sun and the sun's light from the moon. So these two will always come in couples. You will always have a lunar eclipse and a solar eclipse 2 weeks apart. at the same time, and it happens twice a year. So in a general year, you will have 4 eclipses, 2 periods of times when there is a couple of eclipses going on, solar and lunar. Now, 2020 was different because 2020 is crazy and all the different and odd things happen in 2020. Usually we have 4 lunar and solar eclipses during a 1 year. During 2020, we had 6. How come? Okay, so the first lunar eclipse took place just at the beginning of the year. Remember, January 10th, the first lunar eclipse. Now, the second period was around May and June this year, and it was unique because everything in 2020 was unique. And during that time, it so happened that instead of 2 eclipses, usually it's a lunar and solar, we actually had 3 eclipses. So at the same period, there was a lunar eclipse, solar eclipse, and another lunar eclipse. So we had a whole month during June with 3 different eclipses taking place. One of them was an extraordinary one that happens only once in 180 years. This was the solar eclipse on the solstice, which is the sol's day, the sun's day. And because it's about half year apart from one eclipse season to the other, it so happens that the next 2 lunar eclipses also fall in the same year. And we're actually now after a lunar eclipse that took place at the night between the 29th and 30th of November. It wasn't seen. It was a penumbral lunar eclipse, which means that only the shadow of Earth touched the shadow of the moon, and it wasn't a time when you can actually see the moon go black during the night, but it happened. There was this lunar eclipse, and now we're heading towards the final and solar eclipse, the 6th eclipse of 2020 that will take place at December 14th. Now, first of all, we're now in between 2 eclipses, which means that this is a very challenging 2 weeks that we are in. It's not recommended to start new things. It also means that things from the previous lunar and solar eclipses from June and from the beginning of 2020 will pop up because the lunar and solar eclipses are periods that actually talk with one another. They're like vertebrae of the same dragon, and it's very interesting that in some traditions the lunar and solar eclipses and the way they appear in an astrological chart are called the true node and the south node. The coming eclipse season is a south node type of eclipse season, and the south node is the dragon's tail, the true node is the dragon's head. And this means that this is a time to look at the past, in this case, past half year, 6 months that we experienced, and past year. And of course, if you want, we can go further back to the past. And you really need to look it in the eyes and see what kind of changes this whole 2020 period wanted and allowed to happen in your life. What kind of lessons, what kind of challenges. Now this is the time to really complete the teaching of this time, what this period taught us. This is the time to really realize what we want to leave behind, what lessons have we learned, what do we want to change, to really look at what happened during the last year and to decide what we do not want to come back to. And this is a time where things from the past half year, the past year, the distant past, previous reincarnations even, come and try to grab us by the tail, Now, the head of the dragon is aiming towards the future. This is where we want to be. Now we're at a period which is called the dragon's tail, the south node. And this means that things want to take us back to the past, and we actually need to fight it, but also to manage it, bring awareness to it, release these restraints, constraints, fears, all the things that want to drag us to the past are popping up now, but they are actually now popping up for us to deal with them, solve them, make the change, release the past, decide upon our future, where we want to head. So these 2 weeks are very, very challenging weeks. Not that 2020 was easy, but it's challenging in the way of really looking at the mirror of the last half year's occasions, understanding them, making resolutions inside of us, understanding what this time taught us and what we are taking from it as a good tools and good understandings and good resolutions towards the future. So this would be a time where things from the past might pop up, things that we didn't solve will pop up, so we will deal with them once and for all. And it's actually very, very important and very, very good to take this time and to deal with whatever is popping up now. Now, this period will end with a solar eclipse. Solar eclipse is the peak of this period where the past and the future and the conscious and the subconscious are getting mixed with one another, because the moon and the sun are the two opposing symbols in the sky. The consciousness and the subconscious, our adult part and our inner child part, our courages and our fears, our logic and our emotions. And these are really getting mixed during these whole 2 weeks, coming into a peak point of this confusion during December 14th. But it's not only a confusion, because during this time we can also bring things from the subconscious into the consciousness. This is what is beautiful about this time, that things can rise from the unknown, from the unsettled, from the realms of fears, and we can be conscious of it, and by that we shed our light on these fears, and we can change the way our subconscious controls us, the way the past controls us, from bringing in consciousness. So this is what's taking place now, and its peak will be December 14th, where also after that period things will be a bit more relaxed. We will head towards the Jupiter Saturn conjunction on the solstice, which is another a chapter that I already did a video about. Please take a look at it. We're talking about time of inner changes, very deep changes in our subconsciousness, and things that control us from the past and even from past lives. But it's not only personal, it's also, as it happens for each person in our private lives, it also creates a change in the global way. And actually the 21st of December, the solstice and the unique conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn talk about something very similar, but now that doesn't take place in our private lives, but rather in the global manifestation of the past and the future, fighting, mixing, wanting to understand one another and to create a new future.